Hey everybody, John here. We just got done with our most recent Toolbox Tuesday, and unfortunately, someone, this guy, forgot to record the opening part where Ben Fritsch, who's our PayVault expert, kind of shared the specifics on some of what makes PayVault really a unique gateway and who the best customers would be. Now, he did come back a little bit later and summarize those for us because I asked him, but I just wanted to let you know that that we're picking up in the middle of Toolbox Tuesday as he starts to demo the platform. If you have any questions about any of that, reach out to the support team and we'd be happy to answer them for you. Thanks, everybody.
Let's go ahead and share that. So I think you're muted, but I think we're all good now. Looks like it's being recorded. Okay. So I've logged into the PayCompass or PayVault gateway, and this is from a merchant's point of view. So keep in mind, right now we're looking at this from a merchant's view. Once the account is boarded, your merchant will automatically get credentials and log into an account that looks pretty much like this. So we're going to go through the tabs. I'm going to try to do it not necessarily quickly, but just to focus on the most important parts, and then we'll let the questions and the feedback drive what we should cover next. So on the dashboard page is where your merchant, I'm in a Sandbox account, so you're not going to see too much activity, but it's where your merchant will see a basic overview of what's happening in their account. Keep in mind, there is a light theme and a dark theme, so depending on what your merchant likes, that would be up to them to choose what theme to use. Let's go to the Process Transaction tab, which is where most of the activity takes place in as far as your merchant goes. So they have the ability to process card, ACH, and if you happen to have them set up with an EMB terminal, they'll have the terminal option as well displayed over here right next to check. So this account has the ability to process card. We're going to go ahead and just choose a customer. We're going to put an amount of, say, $5. And you can see that this account has a 4% fee added. How to structure the account is really up to you. You can drive that discussion with your merchant. If you wanted different verbiage, if you want, different structures when it comes to the fee added. I'm not going to go through all of them. The gateway does support pretty much every type of fee structure that's out there or that is popular today. There are other sections that we can make use of before we actually process this transaction. So one is custom fields. There's only 2 fields added here. One of them is set as required, so we'll fill that in. But your merchant can add up to 20 custom fields with their own labels. So they can add more information to a transaction. So we see this being used a lot in healthcare spaces. So every transaction in healthcare sometimes will need a lot of additional information, patient information, insurance information, stuff like that. Or again, in the B2B space, sometimes their transactions really have a lot of information that they want to capture. So whatever they fill out in this custom field section will be stored in reports along with the transaction. So it's always something they can reference. There's basic transaction details. That's always going to be there by default. And then billing and shipping information, of course. And lastly, the recurring payment section, which allows the merchant to take this transaction and turn it into a scheduled payment or recurring payment, which they can then manage from the recurring tab. So we'll keep this transaction pretty simple. We'll go ahead and process this transaction. We'll get an approved message. We can print, email the receipt, or just click done. So that was basic card. Not to really stress too much the level 2 and 3, but I want to mention it one more time. The transaction we just ran, as you saw, all we entered was a card number, expiration, and zip. But what actually happened was that the gateway completely optimized the transaction to get it to the lowest possible interchange rate. So the most data that we could add. That's what's one of the things that is so cool about the PayVault gateway is that we take that huge value at 0 additional work, and we give that to you to then be able to win these deals with your merchants. As far as we know, the PayVault gateway is pretty much the only gateway out there that not only completely automates all that level 2 and 3 data, but doesn't take a cut of that. So a lot of gateways will offer level 2 and 3, and even if they do manage to get that automation down pat, will then keep so much of the savings that it almost becomes not that big of a deal that they manage to get the automation done. But this gateway just automates it, gives the savings back to you, so that you can win these bigger and more profitable deals. If they have like ACH set up like this account, they'll have a check tab and they could run pretty much the same functionality, same type of transaction, just with the ACH. Moving over to the batches tab. So this is the transaction we just did. It's pretty flexible when it comes to batch closures. So you can have your merchant set up with up to 3 batch closures per day. They can also manually close the batch at any time. Obviously, transactions until they batch out are a little bit more flexible. So you can adjust the amount either up or down. You can void or recharge a transaction. You can also queue it, which means you're basically pressing pause on a transaction and you're taking it out of the batch so it won't settle when the batch closes. And then when you're ready, you can put it back into the batch so it settles by the next batch closure. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. I'm going to click on queue, take it out of the batch, and it's no longer in the batch. It's in the queue tab. It's just going to sit and bake as an authorized only transaction, as an auth. And then when I'm ready, I put it back into the batch. Okay, little cool little tool over there that I don't think any other gateway has. One other thing that we're not going to spend too much time on before we move on is batch upload. Just keep in mind that what it is, in case it comes up with maybe some of your bigger merchants, the ability to upload a CSV file with an unlimited number of transactions, and then the gateway will process all of these transactions on its own. Okay, we're going to skip ahead to reports, look at that for a minute, and then we're going to back up to invoices. So reports is where all transactions from your merchant, wherever your merchant is taking transactions from, if it's from this VT, this virtual terminal, if it's from an integration, a host payment page, everything will appear in this reports tab. They have all the filter and search options, the ability to print, email, or download, and they can always open up a transaction and really get additional information, all the information that we have, right? They can take additional actions, but this is really like an all-in-one comprehensive reporting tool that they can always use to track what's going on. And now let's back up to invoices. So we mentioned invoice as one of the bigger selling points of the PayVault Gateway. It's a good tool for pretty much every merchant. Every merchant likes the ability to just send out an email or text message to their customer where the customer can click on a link and make a payment. But maybe in particular, we see more success with it when it comes to professional services, so service providers, etc. But not to limit it in any way. The way to actually create an invoice would just be to go here, new invoice, and the invoices are branded to the merchant. They can place their logo on it, their company information, so it makes them look good as well. Again, we'll just select the customer, we'll skip over billing and shipping, and then what they're going to do is either add an existing product, like we've already stored this radio as a product, so it's easier for us, we just add it. They can also add a new product if they wanted to. And then when they're ready, they go ahead and click on send or save if they want to still save it as a draft so they can edit it later. It's pretty flexible again when it comes to that fee, adding that fee. Pretty much every part of the PayVault Gateway supports this fee structure. If it's surcharge, if it's convenience fee, etc. They can add a discount, edit how much is required. Let's just go ahead and send. So we'll get the pop-up that I want to show you. What's going to happen is that you're going to be able to enter one or more email addresses, one or more cell phone numbers, and then you can play around with the subject and the contents. If the merchant really wants, they can add their own files. And then when they're ready, they click on send. And then the customer will get that invoice, again, via email or text message or both. They'll click on that link and be taken to a secure payment form where they're going to see the invoice details and be able to make a payment. So that's as far as invoices goes. Let's look at a couple more tabs before we break for some questions. So customers is where all your customers will be stored. So let's find a test customer over here. We'll have general information for each customer, a wallet which can store as many payment methods as they want to on a, you can make one the default card, but they can have as many stored card or ACH payments on file. And you'll basically see every piece of data associated with this customer. There's an import, there's an export, everything you'd expect in a customer vault. Let's go to recurring. So this is for merchants that are running multiple recurring payments. So think about gyms or schools. They can have hundreds, not thousands of recurring schedules. So all the recurring schedules will be stored on this page, and then they can choose to turn them on, turn them off, delete them, find the ones they're looking for, and they can also edit the recurring schedule at any time by opening up the schedule and just editing it. We've seen reports. Fraud controls is not something we're going to really spend time on today because it's a little technical. It's just something that we feel is good for you to know as a general rule, just good knowledge that the PayVault gateway supports well over 10 different modules, each of them with a lot of customization. So if we click on AVS response as an example, you'll be able to, the merchant that is, will be able to choose which transactions to accept or decline based on address verification system. Again, not going to spend too much time on it, but it's good for you to know that if you do have a merchant that is at risk for fraud or is playing in a more risky space, there's a lot of fraud prevention that you could set up on their account, all built right into their gateway account. Control panel, also something we're not going to spend too much time on. It's where pretty much every customization or every setting that relates to this specific account will reside. So things like when a batch is closed, what should be included in the batch email that gets sent out to the merchant. All the user management, so setting up as many users as they want for this account and giving different permissions to specific users, setting up their invoices, so with their logo, their default template and stuff like that. There's a whole lot that they can do to customize the account to their specific needs. It will take us a really long time to go through each tab. So just as a general rule, this is where all customizations and settings would reside. The last thing I want to focus on before we break for some feedback and questions is paying pages. I want to show you that pretty new tool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new payment page, and you're going to see exactly what that looks like. But first, just a brief note on what payment pages are. So a payment page is this payment form, a freestanding form that is hosted on a link that is branded to the merchant, PayVault, and the merchant. And the merchant can take this link and pretty much put it anywhere they want. They could send it on an email. They could put it under a donate now or pay now button. And it's different than invoicing because the invoice tool that we saw is basically sending out a specific invoice to a specific customer or customers for specific items, for specific amounts. It's all very, very specific, and it's a one-time use. Once that invoice is paid, that link no longer works. That invoice is now paid. The paying pages are different. Paying pages never expire. Anybody with internet access could get to these pages and make a payment. Usually they're just for an open amount field. So the customer is the one that's entering the amount. So it's a lot more flexible and versatile than the invoices. Obviously, they have their different use cases. Both of them are big, big selling points when it comes to this gateway. So they're definitely something you'll want to lead with when you're selling. So let's look at creating a new page. We'll make this Tuesday. That'll be the display name of the page. Make that a capital so it looks a little nicer. And then we're going to go ahead and turn that into the slug as well. The slug is the last part of the payment page. Usually it'll be the merchant name or the company name of the merchant, right? We want it to be, PayVault and then the name of the merchant, so it's identifiable to the merchant. You're going to choose if you want to make this page just authorizing a payment, actually charging, that would be the default charge. And the third option is just creating a customer off of it, not even charging any money, just capturing that card information so that the merchant can go ahead and charge that later. You'll choose a theme, light or dark, and then you'll choose a template. We're going to go ahead and save, which is going to take us into a builder. Now, within this builder, there's a whole lot that you or the merchant can do to customize the page to make it look exactly how you want it to look. So in terms of what fields to have on the page, which ones to require, the coloring, the logo, all that is completely customizable using the block section and the style section. It takes just a few minutes of playing around with it to get the hang of it. There's no coding knowledge, there's no design knowledge that's necessary. Everything is drag and drop, everything is self-explanatory. So this is the builder itself. And once we go ahead and save this page, we're not going to really do anything with it, but I just want to show you what the page looks like. And then we load the page. This is super basic. This is without any customizations, but this is the page. So you can see there's certain fields that could be entered. Then there's the amount field, and then this page has credit card and check as an option, and then the customer goes ahead and processes. So they take this link, again, they send it on an email and a text message on their website, wherever they want, and this makes for a super easy way for them to get paid. So I think that's just a basic overview of what's going on there in the PayVault gateway. There's a lot more that's happening, but I wanted to sort of give you an idea of this gateway and the chief benefits that it brings to the table. And those are just, again, the fact that everything's in one place. There's so much that's built into the gateway itself, from processing card and ACH to recurring to invoices to a payment page builder to level 2 and 3, all of it happening, the fraud protection, all of it happening within PayVault. The user friendliness of it, I hope that came across during the demo. It's clean, it's easy. You don't have to be technical to really play with the gateway. And the fact that it's going to ultimately help you sell and help you sell to bigger and more profitable merchants using level 2 and 3, using the feature set that's built into it. And I'd be happy to answer any questions or clarify anything.
Thanks, Ben. I'll remind everybody you can either ask a question in the chat, and I'll be able to see that, or you can unmute yourself. While people are thinking about it, one of the questions that did come in while you were talking was about QuickBooks integration. And I'm pretty sure I knew the answer to that, but I wanted to go ahead and let you answer that one as well.
That's a great question. I'm happy you brought that up, John, because I should have mentioned it. So we spoke a lot about invoicing, but the invoicing tool that we saw is not connected to QuickBooks. However, the PayVault Gateway is connected to QuickBooks integrators, which means that you can go to merchants that are using QuickBooks and give them this really one-line pitch. Continue using QuickBooks. Don't change anything. We don't need you to switch system. Do whatever you've always been doing, and we will process the payments on the back end. The way that happens is because the PayVault Gateway is integrated to what we call middleware, which manages to be in the behind the scenes of the QuickBooks application and process the payments. Some of those QuickBooks middlewares are Biller Genie, Verosa. There's a newer one called Hyphen. All of them really great programs. And what they do is they allow you to continue using QuickBooks again, as they always have, and they operate in the background together with the PayVault Gateway to take those payments and process them through this gateway account, through this merchant account. So you're coming to the QuickBooks merchant, you're giving them benefits, like you're giving them level 2 and 3 exchange optimization, which continues even in this scenario, but you're also not requiring them to change anything about their workflow, which is going to be very important to them. So the answer, to the answer to the question of, is PayVault Gateway connected to QuickBooks, is a resounding yes.
Perfect. Thank you, Ben. Are there other systems like QuickBooks that integration is also in place?
So QuickBooks in particular is a AR system. I can't think of other specific AR systems that PayVault is connected to, but there are many systems that PayVault plugs into, things like NetSuite and Salesforce and shopping carts like Magento and WooCommerce. So there's different CRMs. I mentioned Salesforce is one, Connective is another one, Odoo is another one. So there's quite a few softwares out there today that PayVault is already connected to. And if it isn't, if you have an opportunity that isn't, just bring it up, because connecting it to another system is always something that we would consider.
Perfect. All right, I'll stop talking so people with questions can ask them instead.
Yep.
One question about the like in your batches, setting aside a specific transaction to queue for a later batch. I'm assuming the reasoning behind that would be for almost like holding a check where somebody's like, hey, could you wait till tomorrow to run this transaction? So my question is, with all your interchange optimization features, is if you hold that batch for over 24 hours, is it still going to get downgraded to a EIRF downgrade?
Okay, really good point. So yeah, the use case, first of all, that you brought up, that is one good use case. Another use case, I think one we see maybe a little bit more often, is you run a transaction and then the merchant realizes they don't have the product in stock, or they don't have that, they're not ready to provide that service. So they don't want the money to actually leave the customer's account. So instead of losing the authorization by voiding it, and then having to re-auth that in a new transaction, they're just going to use the queue feature to hold on to that original auth that they got, but not actually let the batch close on this transaction so the money doesn't leave the customer's account. So yeah, your use case is correct. The part two of your question is yes, meaning you bring up a good point. Holding an auth for too long can definitely downgrade the transaction, and then they wouldn't get the level 2 and 3 benefits. So it should be treated with caution.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hey, Ben, does this gateway accept WEX cards?
No, just MasterCard, Visa, Discover, American Express.
Okay, thank you.
I think you're muted, John.
I am sorry. Yeah, what other questions do we have? Feel free to unmute yourself or type one in the chat box, and we can ask those. Ben, I know one of the questions I've heard is just, or you talked a little bit at the very beginning, and we've had some people jump back or have joined kind of as you were talking. I don't necessarily want you to repeat the introduction, but you shared a little bit about kind of who the ideal merchant would be.
Right.
If you could just kind of summarize that in a couple of sentences, and then we've had a couple of questions come through the chat that I'll ask as well.
Right. So I'll be happy to. So the PayVault Gateway is, in a word, omni-channel. It means it services every type of merchant, from Moto to B2B to e-commerce to retail, etc. But we did say that there are definitely industries in general and in particular that you want to keep in mind when you're working with this gateway, and you want to keep in mind just generally when you're selling, and those would be B2B services, so people providing services versus products, nonprofits, and e-commerce. So we said these industries are good fits to the gateway. The gateways work well with these type of merchants. B2B, we said, is a particularly good vertical to go after, because not only are these accounts almost always a lot more profitable for you, the agent, but the gateway really does a good job at servicing these merchants, chiefly because we automate level 2 and 3 interchange optimization, which could be a huge difference in the bottom line for wholesalers, manufacturers, distributors, people that are doing businesses with other businesses. So it's an easy sell from your part. It's clear what your pitch is, significantly lower crossing rates with a beautiful system. So B2B is always going to be a good shot. Professional services will also be, not only because level 2 and 3 could help them as well, but because there's a lot of features that are built in that will make this system a good fit for their business, like the invoicing tool, hosted payment pages, sometimes recurring payments. All of that would probably be very helpful for them. Nonprofit, we see using the hosted payment page builder a lot, having that pay link up on their website and the ability to send out invoices as well. Recurring payments, a lot of the same features we spoke about will work for nonprofit. And then, of course, e-commerce with our shopping carts and integrations would be a good fit as well. So we want you to think about card present in general. So, but in particular, keep in mind these specific industries. Not to say that if you have a merchant that sometimes takes card present transaction, this wouldn't be a good fit. This would be a good fit in that case. There are integrated terminals, but we did tell you to not think too much about restaurants and strictly retail, as those might not necessarily be the best fit.
Okay, perfect. One of the questions that came in the chat, you had mentioned Connective. The question was, is that the same thing as Checkout Champ?
So interesting, because they're actually owned by the same parent company, meaning it's the same. This is the same people, the same team that owns Connective and Checkout Champ. But you can use Connective without using Checkout Champ. Checkout Champ needs Connective. Let me explain a little bit. Connective is a CRM system. So, customer relationship management tool, I think is the official name. You can have that just running. You can have a merchant that's just using Connective to run their business, and then they could take payments within Connective using the PayVault gateway. Checkout Champ is specifically for e-commerce merchants. So when we're talking about, and they're really targeting really large e-commerce merchants, so people doing at least 6 digits a month, for those type of merchants, Checkout Champ allows them to operate things like Shopify, Magento, some of the more popular shopping cart integrations, and your merchant can continue using them because they're using Checkout Champ as the thing that's powering those stores, those online stores. If you're using Checkout Champ, then you're also going to be using Connective to manage the business part of that online store. That's my understanding. But CheckAChamp is an e-commerce plugin. Connective is a CRM system. They're two different softwares.
Perfect. That was helpful. Any other questions that we've got from the team? I don't want to cut anyone off that still has a question, but I also want to give you the opportunity to maybe walk through one of the features in a little more detail if you think that would be beneficial, Ben.
Okay. Let me think what would be a good feature to maybe spend another minute on.
Maybe some of the customizations that you were showing.
Yeah, okay, that's a good idea because we didn't really spend time on control panel. So I do want to point out some things over here because sometimes it's the small things that really make a big difference to a merchant, right? They'll say everything is fine with the system I've been using until now. Only thing is I can't restrict my users by IP address, right? And if you can do that, then you have my business, right? So it's good for you to know some smaller things as well. So let's go through some of the things that might make sense. General settings is one. So I want to point out 3DS. No, I'm sorry, I'm not sure that's going to get us into a really long conversation. I'm not sure it's a good idea. Let's go to custom receipts instead. So custom receipts means you're customizing the email receipt that the customer gets on every transaction. So I'll go through some maybe more of the common use cases. One of them is surcharge. So we briefly mentioned that the PayVault Gateway supports every type of fee structure that's out there. So you'll have a merchant that says, I don't want to only apply a fee on credit but not debit. I want to apply the fee on all cards, right? So in that case, you're structuring it more as a convenience fee, whatever you want to call it. But in that case, you can have the name surcharge rolling around. So what you'll want to do is come here to custom receipts and go to the surcharge line item and change the label to to fee or convenience fee or something like that. And this way, when the customer gets their receipt, they're going to see $100, fee of $3.50 for a total of $103.50, right? So that's a simple way to keep the verbiage in line with the type of structure that they're working with. Another thing that they can do is add all their custom fields. They can add a logo to their receipts. A lot of merchants really like that, having a logo at the top of their receipts, or a footer message like, thank you for your business, something like that, or some other important piece of information that they'll want to have. If they're a nonprofit, they might have the tax ID there. So that's custom receipts. That's something that some of your merchants might really appreciate. Let's look at user management because it's something that every merchant will use automatically. So as you can see, there's really no limit to the amount of users that a merchant can have. So meaning we're talking about people that have access to this account that we're in right now. So you can have all the users that they want, and then one user could really support another user by activating or deactivating the user, restoring their password, editing their permissions or their details, or deleting a user. When we look at creating a new user, you'll see that one of the required fields is just to create a username and then a first name, last name, and an email. I mentioned IPs. So allowed IPs means, let's say you have a merchant that has people that work from the office, and then the merchant is concerned that they might be able to log in from home and do some funny business. So they want to restrict them to only being able to access the gateway from within the office environment, right? Just as an example. So you can put certain IP addresses here, and then the users will only be able to log in from this IP address. And then for every user, you have two options. You can turn this user into a master user, which means they have permissions to do everything in the gateway that we've seen today and then some. But not all merchants want to give that type of access to at least all of their users. So for those users, we call them limited permission users, they'll leave the master user as off and then choose for each section the type of access that they want to give this specific user. And this could be really, really helpful. It could really save the merchant from a lot of headaches when they're dealing with a lot of clerks and users. And by giving them only the permissions that they need for their job function, the merchant can really save themselves some, unfortunate accidents or whatever by people having the wrong type of access. That's as far as user management goes. The batch settings is also an important tab because first of all, they'll want to choose when a batch should close, which will probably be set up when the merchant gets boarded. But beyond that, there's also where to send batch reports to. So every time a batch closes, the merchant will get an email with a breakdown of the batch, including a CSV attachment with all the details. So who's going to get that batch report? Who's going to get batch errors? You can have as many emails as you want in this for this type of report. And then the actual report that gets sent, we spoke about the CSV attachment that gets sent in the batch email. You can choose what data you want in that attachment. So some merchants will want a lot of information. Some of them will specifically only want a small amount of information. All that is fully customizable. You're going to choose what data to include in this batch report. One of the people on this call brought up earlier the expiring auth, right? Meaning how long an auth could stay. And this is something that's going to be here in batch settings. Meaning the merchant can set up their account, or you can set up their account in a way that when there's an authorized only transaction, it's going to automatically expire after a certain amount of time. You might want to do this because industry regulations don't allow holding it for too long. You might not want them to have downgraded transactions. So you can choose anywhere from 1 to 30 days of how long an authorization should sit before it just expires, and then they'll have to run a new transaction. Let's look at one more, invoice settings. So this is where the merchant will be able to template or brand their invoice. So they're going to upload their logo, they're going to put their company information. But even outside of the actual branding, there's going to be a lot of settings that they might want to use, especially if they're heavy users of the invoicing tool. So one thing is that they can set up notifications either before, after, or on the due date. So when they send out an invoice to a customer, right, and then let's say the due date is 30 days from now, then they can set it up in a way that 25 days from now, 5 days before the due date, the customer will automatically get an email reminder that their invoice is coming due with a link to conveniently direct them to the payment page, to the invoice payment form. They can also choose a default due date. If they have one specific one, they can choose what to require for an invoice payment, the default surcharge or fee that's going to be applied, along with default terms. They can also template the actual verbiage or the body of the invoice, so they can have default subject, default body, if they have specific language that they want to automatically have included. So it's taking as much of the manual labor of creating every invoice and allowing them to completely automate that. So say, pretty much all this is by default. I'm just going to have to change some details every time I create an invoice. And this way they get saved a lot of time, a lot of work. Those are probably the more popular tabs that get used within Control Panel. Some things here are really specific to developers, things like digital wallet settings, things like webhooks. These are things that really only come into play when you're dealing with an ISV or an integration, a custom integration. And of course, we'd be happy to elaborate on those when the time comes. But between general settings, the batch settings, user management, invoice settings, you should be able to cover 9 out of the 10 use cases that might come up with merchants.
Perfect. Thank you, Ben. That was great. I'm gonna give the group one more chance to ask any questions they may have. Feel free to type them in the chat or unmute yourself. And if not, we're gonna give you a few minutes back in your day and send you back, hopefully to lunch or something even more exciting than lunch. It looks like that's all the questions we've got. Ben, thank you so much for the time. This has been great. Really appreciate you taking the time to walk us through things. Certainly, if you have questions, reach out to the support team here at PayCompass, and we'll either connect you directly with Ben or help walk through it and answer together.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much, John. I appreciate the opportunity.
Of course.
And thank you guys for listening.
Have a great Tuesday, everybody.